Call the August 10th meeting of the Common Council to order at 7 o'clock. Would you all rise, and Ms. Wild, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Lees, will you call the roll?
Mr. Ayre? Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Hampton? Mr. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of our July 27th joint meeting with the school board?
So moved. Second.
There's a move and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? It passes. Can I have the approval of a motion to approve the minutes of the July 27th meeting?
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the July 27th meeting. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the agenda and a second. This is also a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Petitions by citizens who are present. I have none in front of me, but there are white cards out on the table if you want to turn them into the clerk or just come forward now. All right, we'll move on. Council committee reports. Park Board.
Yes, we met last week. It was a pretty short agenda. The Park Board did approve a contract to remodel the train station out at Forest Park.
Great, thank you. Any questions for
Hub
Mr.
station?
Hobb
Hub
Station?
station.
Yep.
Was there any discussion about bunkers on the golf course? You
Not at
recall?
that particular meeting. I did discuss a little bit with Brandon. They're working on it as far as how much and where and what from.
Okay.
Comments or questions? How about Roads Committee?
Yep. Roads Committee met on August 6th. Mark Boyce, Greg O'Connor, myself were present. We had a slew of topics that we discussed. 146 came up as usual. We talked about street rehabilitation. Kingsley subdivision is complete, as is Morse Overlook and Country Lake Estates. I saw today that they were working through Old Town, so that is going along nicely. Favorite of Miss Wiles, the corporate campus infrastructure improvement project is going along well. I think we talked about it last meeting here, but Oleo Road is now open, which is, if anybody hasn't been out there, it looks really nice. 146th Street remains closed. Reopening is scheduled for September and is really looking great. We talked about 146th Street and Allisonville Road interchange. The letting is expected in fall of 22. Talked about State Road 37 as that continues to be under construction. 146th Street interchange has a continued delayed final completion date, but still is in progress. And then talked a little bit about the South Allisonville Road Trail. Letting is expected in October, and that is going to be a great way to calm traffic in that area. And then I think that covers a lot of the highlights.
Thank you. Any questions for the Roads Committee? Seeing none, Finance Committee?
Thank you, Mr. President. We met August 5th. Myself, Dan Peterson, Greg O'Connor, and Megan Wiles were in attendance. Noblesville Main Street gave us their annual review. That was with Liz Tate and Jay Mundy. Mr. Light talked additional appropriation for premium pay for essential workers. Mr. Murray and Ms. Smith discussed the tax increment financing pro forma reports. And Mr. Spalding discussed our debt amortization schedule summary. And the claims do come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Questions for Mr. Davis? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the claims.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the claims. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Passes. Previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance 570721, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the general fund. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller. And as you referenced, this is previously discussed, so it's an additional appropriation ordinance on second reading, and the purpose is to increase the funding for the legal department for costs well beyond what was planned or budgeted for all the, kind of legal work they do, but specifically a lawsuit that the city is a plaintiff in, seeking remuneration for damages to city property. So this cost may be recovered, at least in part, in the lawsuit, but that recovery would happen down the road. So the budget needs to be adjusted now, and then if we get that recovery, it'll just supplement the general fund at some later point. And if you have more questions about the specifics of the lawsuit, I don't think I can answer those, but Lindsay Bennett can.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? Seeing none, this is a matter of public hearing, so I'll open up the public hearing for ordinance 570721.
Mr. President, seeing no one come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing, or close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 570721 in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. How about a motion?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would move that we approve ordinance 57-07-21 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion to approve ordinance 570721 in a second. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. New ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance 580821, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund to augment funding for premium pay for essential workers under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, of 2021, and establishing a public hearing.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, as you just referenced, this is the first reading of a new ordinance, but it seems like it's an old ordinance because it's a follow-on to an action that the council has previously taken, as has been discussed and approved by the council. The city received its coronavirus relief fund monies through the ARPA Act, and you have approved a plan for the expenditure of those funds, which includes premium pay for city employees that were working during the pandemic. And then as a second part of that, excuse me, I don't know, I can get my throat clear.
You all right?
I'm fine, I just can't
Need some
speak
water?
well. I don't know what I need. But as part of that, even though you've approved the plan, the money has to be appropriated. And as we went through the action, the previous two council meetings, we approved an estimated amount for that. And after going through the process of verifying the actual time worked and employees eligible for this benefit, we discovered that our original estimate was low, and so this is a follow-on action to increase the funding for that premium pay plan that is already part of your approved plan for the use of these funds. So kind of a long way of getting there, but this just basically, kind of finalizes and puts in place all of the funding for that plan that you had previously approved.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President, it looks like, and I think we discussed this in Finance Committee, but it's less than, what was the original amount, 860?
Yeah, the amount that was originally appropriated was 860. This adds 60 to it, so making 920,000 appropriated. And then the estimated cost, we won't really know the final actual cost till it's calculated, and the plan is for this to be executed on August 27th. But you will have, if you take this action, you will have appropriated 920,000 to fund a cost that we currently estimate at 912.
So this is just short of 7% increase from what we approved to begin with.
And actually, as you can see on Exhibit A, the big factor was the original estimate underestimated the number of parks and street employees. There's more turnover in that group, so we ended up underestimating the number of people that would have been eligible for this premium pay.
Yes.
I would move that we establish a public hearing on this item in 2 weeks.
Second.
There's a motion to establish a public hearing for ordinance 580821 at the next regular meeting. And a second, there's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Thank you. 590821, council to consider ordinance 590821 and ordinance amending ordinance 581020 to permit the construction of a barn on a lot separate from the principal structure at 11441 East 151st Street.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Joyce Ann Yelton.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Our monitors are not on.
Monitor's not on? No, stands a reason.
Okay.
It's all right. Can look up here.
Oh, that's right.
Thank you.
The missing part,
It's all in our packages.
blame it on the supply chain.
Thank you.
As you may recall, this item was before you earlier in the year to create what is known as the Sweet Peas Flower Farm. And during that presentation, she proposed to build her house in this location, and then the barn and her actual growing fields would be the remainder of this area. At the time that she originally came through with this item, it was unclear to staff that she had proposed to have her accessory building barn on a different lot than her residential structure. So basically, under our Unified Development Ordinance, under an R1 zoning district, which is the underlying zoning district, you cannot have an accessory building that is not on the same lot as the principal structure. So the only thing that this ordinance is doing is basically allowing the construction of that barn for her, what is to be known as Sweet Peas Flower Farm, to operate her business from. This has nothing to do with the operation of the business. This strictly has to do with the construction of the barn on a separate lot from the principal structure. It was sent to you from the Plan Commission with an 8-0 favorable recommendation.
President, just a question. So Joy's saying, if I read the ordinance correctly, as long as she's the operator, this will remain in force, and if there's a change in ownership, this is null and void, and
Right, or if her business should cease to exist, over the next 5 years, then someone new could not come in and operate a new business without going through a public hearing process before the Plan Commission and the council.
Any other questions for Ms. Shelton? Is the petitioner here, or?
Andy Ward is present.
if you put that back up there, Joyce Ann, I'm just curious, does that, because Summer Road, what's north?
Okay, so north of this would be 156th Street here. North of this is Brooks Farm subdivision.
That's Summer.
Summer Road is
on the top, I think, isn't it?
No, Summer Road is, basically, if you look at this plan, is going to be to the right of this. So what you have is, immediately to the south of this would be what was Fiore Nursery.
Hoods, right?
Goods is-
No, well, it
it's
was
close.
Fiore Nursery. And then to the east of this is actually Hood's Gardens.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
I'm gonna leave that up there if you have any.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. For the record, Andy Wirt, land use professional of the law firm of Church Lantern, with offices 2 North 9th Street here in Noblesville, representing our client Cecily Fox. She may, I'm sure you recall us being in front of you back in October of last year. Sweet Peas is an existing Noblesville-based wholesale flower business. The zoning approval we received allowed her to branch out and basically do retail sale of cut flowers. Since our approval last year, we've also received approval from the Technical Advisory Committee. It was going through this process that we learned that replatting the property would not be allowed per Joyce Ann's comments there. As she explained, the UDO does not permit accessory buildings prior to construction of the principal building. It was always our position that the barn was the principal building. Obviously, staff has a different interpretation, and we respect that. Cecily and her husband Wes have started construction of their home, but do not and have not planned on building a second home on the barn lot. So I do want to make it clear we have not changed our plans since last year. It's really just kind of a tackling a fine point of the UDO here. Hopefully pretty straightforward. Happy to answer any questions.
It came up in planning commission, but I mean, it makes sense they already touched on it, but to separate the business from her personal liability.
That's the reason for it being on a separate parcel?
Correct, yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. Wirt, would you like for us to waive the rules and pass this on the first reading?
That would be great if you're inclined to do that. My client will be
Plan
very
really has
impressed
not
with me.
changed.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would move that we suspend the rules and pass this item as ordinance with
Second.
Motion to waive the rules and pass 590821 on the first reading as second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Passes.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve ordinance number 5908-21 as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve ordinance 590821 in a second. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 600821, an ordinance amending ordinance 400815 to include an updated preliminary development plan for a varsity tennis facility for the Noblesville schools at 1610 and 1650 Field Drive.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Joyce Ann Yelton.
I'm trying.
We got all night.
Okay, great. This item before you is an amendment to an adopted government use overlay. When this originally came through back in 2015, there were different uses that they had proposed for the existing structures there. Since that time, they have now found a way to repurpose it. I will say that most of the buildings that are currently existing on the site, which was formerly a worship building, there are some accessory structures and residential structures, are in need of demolition. Basically, the surrounding area does include, to the north of this, Fairfield Farms. To the west of this, you've got Northridge Subdivision. You have residential structures continuing to the east, but they are on 2-acre parcels or greater in size. And then basically across the street, Field Drive, are mostly Noblesville school facilities. Again, the applicants are seeking an amendment to the adopted 2015 ordinance, and what they are proposing to establish there are varsity tennis courts. So as you can see, they have provided the tennis courts. We have parking. There is a concession restroom building here, ticket area. There are these little dots here. There are like 4 sets of them. Those are actually the bleachers. Their building, as proposed, basically is very similar to several of the most recent accessory buildings that have been constructed by the school. So this will continue to match what their most recent buildings have been constructed. And it did come to you from the Plan Commission with a favorable recommendation for adoption. Again, the comprehensive master plan does show this area as being institutional, of which schools are considered an institutional use. With that, I will ask if you have any questions of staff.
President,
Yes.
there is lighting on the tennis courts, correct?
That is correct.
And the spillage stops at the
Property line.
property line?
That is correct.
And Fairfield Farms, was anybody here at the Plan Commission? Aaron?
Yes.
Yes.
What was there today?
It was residents, I think, behind.
Right.
Noise that was going to come from the tennis facility. But it passed unanimously from Planning Commission.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Need the
We have a
lands.
whole lot of noise from tennis courts.
Well,
Normally
Yes.
those matches are pretty quiet.
generally, the
so-
matches are
yes.
probably over
Yeah.
by.
That's right.
And again, these are varsity tennis courts. I believe they're only going to be used during their actual tennis tournaments. The tennis courts that are currently across the street are still going to remain and be used as, I believe, again, their practice tennis courts.
President, Dr. Monday looks like he's ready to jump out of his seat a
Right.
couple times to answer some of these questions. If we would have give him a brief minute to.
Are there other questions for Joyce Daniel? If not, is the petitioner present?
Oh, Matt's gonna say.
Oh, that's going to do it.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. For your record, my name is Matt Skelton, partner with Church Hill and Antrim with offices at 2 North 9th Street, just catty corner from here. And with me this evening is Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Dave Mundy, of course, if we have any detailed questions that I don't cover. As Joyce Ann pointed out, we're seeking an amendment to an existing GUO district, specifically really just addressing the plan that was attached to the original GUO. At that time, there was contemplation that an expanded facility for tennis would be necessary at some point, but it wasn't determined that it would be necessarily on this site, and there wasn't really a plan for change at that time. So that's why we're here before you this evening. As part of this project, just informationally, we will be installing a pedestrian crosswalk across Field Drive that will connect the campus. We did hold a neighbor meeting on July 15th. We were able to meet several of our neighbors, most of which live to the north, and they had a lot of great questions, and we were able to answer them and share the school's plans. And specifically, the items that they were most interested was access, and I think Joyce Ann touched on it. Specifically, these are varsity, this is the varsity facility. It will not be, any public play would occur at the existing tennis courts on the other side of the street. This will be a closed, for the most part, facility unless it's being used for varsity tennis purposes. Let's see here. Oh, there will be a double row of fencing. That was another thing that came up. Specifically, I think some of you have been to tennis facilities. There's a higher fence that keeps balls in the courts, and then there's more of a perimeter fence that controls access to the facility. So this will have both of those things. Sound was one of the things that came up. There's no sound system proposed as part of this proposal, so the school understands the city's noise ordinance and has to comply with it just like everybody else. The lighting was another item that came up, and we're familiar with the city's lighting standards. We have to comply with them just like everybody else. And as a matter of fact, even a step beyond that, there's been a photometric plan, compliant photometric plan submitted to the city, reviewed and approved. So we're in good shape there. And then landscaping was the other item. The neighbors wanted to make sure that to the extent that any of the mature trees along our perimeter are on the school's property, that they would remain. And some of them may be, and if they are, we've committed to retain them. But we've also supplemented a great deal with our landscaping plan to fill in the gaps and to enhance the landscaping along there. We did appear before the Plan Commission at its July 19th meeting. We received a unanimous favorable recommendation. I will defer to Joyce Ann on this. I don't believe we have any outstanding compliance issues that need to be resolved before final consideration. So if the council was inclined, we would appreciate a final consideration this evening as well. With that, we're happy to respond to any questions that you have.
Additional questions?
That's ordinance 60-08-21 on first reading.
Motion to waive the rules and pass this ordinance on the first reading and a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It has to be unanimous. I had to wait on you. 7-0.
Mr. President, I
Yes.
move that we pass ordinance 60-08-21 as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve ordinance 60-08-21 in a second. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson? 7 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you,
Thank you.
folks.
Council to consider Resolution RC 4821, a resolution amending the adopted comprehensive master plan to include an updated thoroughfare plan and light pole plan and fixtures. Joyce Ann Yelton. Thought we'd get through this meeting without light poles, but thank you.
Okay, this item before you is an update to our basically overall comprehensive master plan. The thoroughfare plan is always a portion of that comprehensive plan. As you may recall, earlier this year, actually earlier in 2020, I believe, we actually adopted an updated comprehensive master plan, and we were still working on the thoroughfare portion of it. So we have now updated the thoroughfare plan. Some of the items that you will see changes in would include, I'm going to say, updated areas that we show new roundabouts being proposed. Obviously, we have marked the ones that have already been basically installed or constructed since our last update in 2008. We've reclassified a few of the thoroughfares. We also added a road classification of, on the thoroughfare plan of interstate. We didn't have that classification on there before, but we've added it. And again, it just adopts, what we foresee could happen in the future as far as thoroughfare upgrades go, whether they be roundabouts or the classification of those streets. Again, those classification of the streets allow us to, when we have developers come in and they need to dedicate right-of-way, then they have to dedicate the half right-of-way that basically is a part of their project. So this certainly is a benefit to the city to update the thoroughfare plan. The other portion of this is what we call the city light pole plan. And basically what this will do is give us a standardized light fixture in different areas. So the areas that you see that are outlined here in yellow are major thoroughfares for the most part, and they will have what they call the Sanibel, or this decorative type of structure. Basically, all of your other roadways, anything that is a Duke item that is currently under contract, that we have a contract with. They will be that type of structure. And then anything else, basically, that would be on local roads, pathways, downtown, are basically your Duke Acorn LED. Again, this did come to you from the Plan Commission with a favorable recommendation with an 8-0 vote.
Thank you. You failed to mention the color. What color will they be? So,
Oh, I'm sorry. The fixtures will be black.
thank you. And then there was a plan to, as obviously as a light pole is hit or something happens, to be replaced. Did you get a schedule for the existing poles would also be?
Yes, I did, but two.
Can we get it?
Yes, I think we both did. I'll go ahead and speak on behalf of that. I think earlier I was hopeful when I said possibly 10 years, but it's very unpredictable, so 10 to 20 is what we would shoot for. And I believe even in the meeting that we said previously, if one pole was hit, we would replace it with the new. Even engineering thought that would look a little weird. So we may be requesting or discussing funding opportunities for painting a series of poles. So we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis.
For the rest of the council, the question was, what was the timeline for replacing the existing green poles and switching them over to black?
Yes.
The rest of the city.
So as of right now, it could take several decades to make that whole change happen unless we wanted to specifically target areas for painting purposes incrementally each year with a dedicated amount. We budgeted in Patty's line, one of Patty's line items, hopefully.
By that time, we might decide to turn them all green.
No, that will not happen.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
Mr. Boyce is.
Yeah, Mr. Boyd.
Question, for either one of you. So we do the thoroughfare plan, and I think it's a good idea, like you said, with the getting the right of way. I think most of the time we've caught it anytime we were going to do something with trails and we wanted a developer to donate right of way when they were coming in for trails. Is this something that we should look at putting into the thoroughfare plan so that they're in for future trails that we know of? Or is there something I'm missing?
Yes, there is a Noblesville Alternative Transportation Plan that is separate from the thoroughfare plan. So thoroughfare plan's for cars, the NAT plan is for people, and that's handled in the Parks Department. And so we do work with developers as they come in, so you'll see.
I knew we have a few times, but I
Yeah.
didn't know if there was like a
Over the
plan to
last
it or
few
whatever.
years, we've asked them to kind of take a broader look at how one subdivision will connect into the greater pedestrian network, and so they are more conscious of that and more willing to work with us on that. Even the most recent development, Maryland Woods, thank you, is even going to consider how they will connect through to Hyde Park after that announcement. So one of their representatives was here just a minute ago, but they'll be doing a 10-foot wide sidewalk there to connect it. And so they're even thinking more broad than.
So
without-
be quiet, Counselor Boyce, we got it covered.
No,
I got it.
no, stop it. I just have a good answer for it. I like it. That's an
Absolutely.
easy
Thank
question.
you.
Thank you for the softball.
Any other questions?
President?
Yes.
I would move that we approve Resolution RC-48-21 as presented.
Second?
Motion to approve Resolution RC 4821 in a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Council comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No council comments? The Porch Festival was outstanding, anybody who missed it, and we're looking forward to it next year. It really was well done on Logan Street, and Jason Pearson, just a citizen, put it all together, and he really did an outstanding job, and it was a lot of fun, so. Thank you. Any other comments? Meeting's adjourned.